Meow, I'm Huples cat. I've read this book and I'm going to review it for you. The trees were watching and not impartially. The trees knew what was up. The trees talked among themselves. They were sensitive to the seismic reverberations of bombs far distant. Trees miles away where the ocean had begun to breach the land were dying, though it would take years for them to be reduced to albino logs. The trees had all the time the rest of us do not have. The mangoes could outsmart it, pull up their roots like a Victorian lady's skirt, sip the salt from the ground, so maybe they'd be fine, with the alligators and the rats and the roaches and the snakes. Maybe they'd be better off without us. Sometimes suicide is a relief. That is the right noun for what was happening. The sickness in the ground and in the air and in the water was all a clever design. There was a menace in the woods, and Rose could feel it, and another child would have called it God. Did it matter if a storm had metastasized into something which no noun yet existed? Did it matter if the electrical grid broke apart like something built of Lego? Did it matter if Lego would never biodegrade, would outlast Notre Dame, the pyramids of Giza, the pigment daubed on the walls of Lascaux? Did it matter if some nation claimed responsibility for the outrage? Did it matter that it was condemned as an act of war? Did it matter if this was a pretext for retaliation long hoped for? Did it matter that proving who had done it via wires and networks was actually impossible? We had little tidbits of stuff, now we're going to get hit on the head. Did it matter if an asthmatic woman named Deborah died after 6 hours trapped on an F train stalled beneath the East River, and that the other people on the subway walked past her body and felt nothing in particular? Did it matter that machines meant for supporting life ceased doing the hard work after failure of backup generators in Miami, in Atlanta, in Charlotte, in Annapolis? Did it matter if the morbidly obese grandson of the eternal president actually did send a bomb? Or did it matter simply that he could, if he wanted to? Not fully stated, but it is implying that North Korea has in fact launched a bomb on the United States of America. We do know that in South Carolina there's been a super hurricane landed and it's causing widespread devastation. Archie, the teenage son, he has a small role in the book. It's not really a critical role, but it's an interesting role. I think the author captured the character of Archie quite well. He didn't feel the tick burrowing into his ankle any more than he could Earth's deliberate daily rotation. He didn't feel anything in the air because it felt unchanged. This is the only real clue as we get to why Archie falls sick. And, spoiler, he's going to fall sick. She was sitting there not doing anything more when it happened, when there was something, a noise, but that didn't cover it. Noise was an insufficient noun. Or maybe noise was always impossible to describe in words. What was music but noise? Could words get at Beethoven? This was a noise, yes, but one so loud it was almost a physical presence. So sudden because of course there was no precedent. There was nothing, real life, and then there was noise. Of course they'd never heard a noise like that before. You didn't hear such a noise, you experienced it, endured it, survived it, witnessed it. You could fairly say that their lives could be divided into two. The period before they heard that noise and the period after. It was a noise, but it was a transformation. It was a noise, but it was a confirmation. Something had happened. Something was happening. It was ongoing. The noise was confirmation, even as the noise was mystery. Don't worry, the noise is going to be explained. It's an absolute critical part of this. The noise bade those deer, more than 1,000 in number, already heedless of the property lines drawn by men, to stampede through gardens without even stopping for a nibble. Homeowners were too distracted by the shattered windows, by the screaming children, by the infant eardrums, irreparably affected, to gawk at all those animals. They actually discuss what the noise is, and they kind of touch upon it and then reject it. They think it might be a plane going through the sound barrier. During the conversation, GH does tell them something that's very important. I noticed today, did you? There was no air traffic, not one plane, not one helicopter. GH knew as his wife said it that this was true. You're right. I mean, usually we hear so many. Planes, helicopters. What do you mean? Amanda asked. There must have been. Rather than discuss this piece of news, Amanda gets rid of her children because she doesn't want them around the news, and then she kind of flails again. They then have an interesting conversation about preps and about what's going on, and basically it's all kind of futile. Amanda was furious. We don't have the internet. We don't have our phones. We don't know what anything is. She blamed it on these people. They knocked on the door and ruined everything. Amanda does go through the stages of grief here. I'm not going through all of them. It's kind of fascinating. Amanda wept more now. But we won't know what is happening until we do. Maybe the television will come back on. Ruth tried to sound optimistic. Or our cell phones will work again. Amanda said it like a prayer. Meanwhile, Clay in his car, lost, is having an epiphany. Masculine responsibility, Clay realised, was utter bullshit. Clay idled there because there was no traffic to block. He waited 8 minutes, sure the noise would come back. It did, but over Queen's, distant enough that he couldn't hear it. Solitude made the noise unbearable for Clay, but so did its opposite. In Queen's, crowds formed and panic metastasized. People ran, people wept. The police barely bothered to pretend to do anything. While everybody at the Airbnb is basically going through some form of denial, either prep denial or outright denial or panic denial, whatever it is, Rose is not. She didn't want to hide in bed. Rose didn't want to hide at all. She stood up and stretched as you might after a restorative night's sleep. She stretched her arms and legs and they both felt powerful and alive. Rose walked to the window and tried to see into the trees. She wasn't sure what she was looking for, but she would know it when it appeared, and knew too that it would appear. Television would have been palliative. Television would have stunned them, entertained them, informed them, or helped them forget. We need to fill the bathtubs. Amanda wasn't sure what was required. She was guessing. Fill the bathtubs? Clay took it for a figure of speech. She lowered her voice. In case. The water. Does the water not run if the power goes out? Clay had no idea. It did not. The next day, or the day after that, certainly the day following that one, some residents in the uppermost apartments in Manhattan would fall into delirium that presaged their eventual dehydration. Archie, you feeling okay? He exhaled slowly, a long and tremulous breath. He did not know where he was. He did not understand what was happening. He sat up, this movement abrupt too. He opened his mouth, not to speak but to move his jaw, which hurt, of which he was unaware. In some way that seemed new or different or wrong. I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? She pulled the duvet back, revealing his thin frame, releasing the radiant heat of his body, so powerful she could feel it without laying hands on him. Archie? He made a sound, like a hum. He leaned forward and vomited on his own lap. Now I'm going to have to say, he has been bitten by a tick. This is pretty quick for a tick to actually cause this sort of response. In fact, I don't think it would cause a response like this. And for me, it's never really explained why he gets sick. It was too intimate. But Ruth had foresight. It would save them the trek to the laundromat when they got home. Amanda did not know that the laundromat was closed. She did not know that the Chinese man who ran it was inside the elevator that carried passengers between the turnstiles and the platform at the R station in Brooklyn Heights, and he'd been there for hours, and he'd died there, though that was many hours in the future yet. So this is a massive and ongoing major disaster. What if it was a war, big enough to ensnare the world? The national borders became like castle walls. She didn't know that it was worse, that war could not describe it. Those planes had been sent from Rome, New York, to meet another approaching from Western Africa. Bad intelligence. They ended up killing 400 odd souls before they got near enough our borders to have to fill out their immigration paperwork. The pace of things used to be slower. Now a nut didn't have to shoot an archduke. Every day was a jumble of near simultaneous oddity. I'm not altogether sure why that's in the book. I don't think it really helps the book, and I don't even think it's kind of sane. There's very few people who immigrate into America from Africa on boats. So after several days, the power's still on and they still have kibble and food. And they also crucially have alcohol. So none of them are doing anything at all to actually get ready for what is an ongoing disaster. But then they decide to act. I'm packing. We're not coming back here. We're going home. Clay understood her insistence. If they thought it, it would be so. He took clean underpants from the chest of drawers and placed them atop the bed. It's been a strange day. I need reality. Amanda sat on the bed. A day that felt like a week. Could it be that we're addicted to our phones? Like an actual addiction? Because I feel unwell. Clay was charging his, wanted to be sure it was ready when the network came back online. Amanda fretted. What if that noise made us sick? It might be possible. Get home. Get back to what is known. Now they've been sitting around on their duff for like about 48 hours at this point, so that might not be feasible. It may not even be sensible. What we as the reader know, but they don't know, what is going on in New York, really means you should think twice before going there. That's a flamingo. She said it even though it was obvious. A pink bird was a flamingo. It was so specific, the comma of its beak, the forte mark of its illogical neck, that a toddler would know it. That's a flamingo? That's a flamingo. With his fingertips, G.H. rubbed the steam from his glasses. They did not know what was happening in the world, but they knew that. The flamingo beat its wings more. They let their eyes adjust, and they could see another flamingo. No, 2. No, 3. No, 4. No, 5. No, 6. Strutting on the lawn with their backward gait. We've already seen the deer migrate out of the area en masse, which is a clear and absolute sign that perhaps you should. Now flamingos are turning up. They rationalise the flamingo's presence. Of course they do. Escape from a zoo, escape from some rich person's menagerie, who knows? Truth will be revealed. But first, that horrible noise. They were quiet, like they knew it was coming. It came. The same noise? Sure. Yes, probably. Why not? Who knew? Once, twice, 3 times. The window over the sink cracked. The pendant light over the counter did too. The electricity probably should have turned off, but it didn't. No one would ever be able to answer precisely why. The noises overlapped, but were discreet. The sound, they didn't know this, of American planes in the American sky, speeding towards the American future. A plane most people didn't know existed. A plane designed to do unspeakable things, heading off to do them. Every action had an equal and opposite reaction, and there were more actions and reactions than could be counted on the party's 8 hands. What their government was up to, what the other governments were up to, just an abstract way of talking about the choices of a handful of men. Lemmings were not suicidal, they were driven to migrate and overconfident about their ability. The leader of the pack was not to blame. They all plunged into the sea, thinking it was easy to traverse as a puddle. So human an instinct in a bunch of rodents. Millions of Americans huddled at home in the dark, but only thousands of them heard the noises and comforted children and one another and wondered just what they were. Some people got sick because that was just their constitution. Others listened and realised how little they'd understood about their world. This is literally a great unplugging of civilization. We now know that American planes are going supersonic over America repeatedly, trying to intercept foreign planes or foreign missiles. For as confident as we all are in our modern technology and our ability to cope with the absence of it, modern military strategy is very confident that they can cope with whatever is thrown at them. History shows that confidence is always misplaced eventually. That noise again, it was the final one. It was one of the last planes. The insects outside fell silent, baffled. The bats that hadn't succumbed to white nose syndrome fell from the sky. The flamingos barely paid it mind. They had enough to worry about. After a heavy evening of drinking and doing very little to prepare for this, Amanda wakes up and is quite sick the next day, vomiting. Is it radiation sickness? Is it a bacterial infection? Is it a bioweapon? Or is she just hungover? Clay also has problems the next morning. His are of the diarrhea type. Did he know if this was a hangover or a symptom of something worse? He did not. Again, the uncertainty, the lack of concrete information, it's really unhinging for the characters in this book, but also for the reader reading this, even though again we're getting things to hang on what's going on in the external world. The world that's been left behind, we have a kind of an idea about. People in the book have no idea. Archie gets very sick, then he starts to feel a lot better, and then his teeth start to fall out. It kind of reminds me of radiation sickness. But the problem is, if Archie's had a dose that bad, why is Rose not affected? Nobody else is particularly sick. The diarrhea and the vomiting are easily explained by the amount of alcohol they consumed. Why has just Archie got this? It's interesting, it's not his constitution. Your constitution's not going to have your teeth fall out within 24 hours. Didn't make any sense when I read the book, still doesn't make any sense, but let's get over that. Did you fill the bathtub? Amanda was doing what she was able to. It's an emergency, we will need water. Now, if you have a water bob, by all means go ahead and fill the bathtub, and if you don't have a water bob, by all means go and fill the bathtub, but it's not really going to be potable, drinkable, after about 72 hours or so. What you need to do is fill every single available container you can possibly find, including decorative vases, with water, and if you have cling film, cover all the surfaces if you don't have lids. In an emergency where there's been a blackout, even if you still have power, you want to consider what will happen when the power fails, and what will happen is the water eventually will stop pumping. Water's a critical resource. It's much more critical than canned tomatoes. Of course, you also need canned tomatoes, but thirst will kill you a lot faster. This has been a 2024 Wolfie Terry's Had a Treat production.
Thank you.